107.5. We are now officially live on Facebook as well as on YouTube. Now, during our last interview or rather chat on negative behavior influences, our Queen Sis Liezel Snyman reminded us of how Jesus, who, endured incomprehensible negativity, always responded with eternity in mind. And in doing so, he freed himself from the subjection of the devourer. Now, today, Liezel Snyman, the author of Beautifully Flawed, will share the power of faith, or rather, how the power of faith in God helped her to overcome the consequences of negative influences from her past. And as I mentioned earlier on, we love hearing from you. We want you to join in on the discussion on the chat and to let us know on our WhatsApp line, or you can also comment on Facebook or YouTube as we are currently live. How has your faith in particular helped you to overcome negative influences in your life? Good morning, sis. We are matching today. What is going on?
Matchy, matchy. Great minds, things alike.
How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Can you hear me properly?
Awesome. Let me just turn up the volume. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. I can hear you.
Wonderful. There we go. Wonderful. It was
Fantastic
one of my
stuff.
earbuds that was not great. You're looking gorgeous, my sister queen, all warm and cozy.
Thank you. Thank you. You too. I love the fact that we are matching. Both of our turtlenecks or polynecks are white. And then, I don't know, the Lord is just amazing.
He is showing us the things and how we dress today. Yeah. No, listen,
Mhm.
it's the heart. I think it's the heart connection.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. And speaking about the heart, I really love today's topic, the power of faith over
Mm.
negative influences. And I want you, to talk us through what challenges and vulnerability did you overcome, once you have committed your life to Christ.
Sure. I think, and I'm hoping I'm not the only one, because I think it's one thing to say that the moment you committed your life to Christ, everything just became perfect. But for
Mhm.
me personally, I think the greatest challenge that I had to overcome initially was the fact that for a long time after God started renewing my life, I was still challenged by the people who were still looking at me with past tinted glasses. They
Mm.
didn't see who I had become. They didn't see the change that happened in my heart when God embraced me. So um, even after the encounter with God, I was constantly reminded that because of my divorce status, I was actually an adulterer, because the Bible says so. And
Mm.
there was even at one point that I was advised to reconcile with my first husband, who at the time was already remarried. And for me, it placed me in such a confliction. I was conflicted by, how is it that this cannot be more, more smoother? For
Mhm.
a long time, I was reminded that I should actually consider not remarrying at all, because whoever I'm going to be married to would then also become an adulterer. So everybody was looking at me with past tainted glasses. And I mean, I think that in itself is something that can obviously influence your confidence levels. For me, that was not all. I think
Yeah.
everybody that had a bit of a life, and mine was not. I made very bad choices when I was outside of God's will. There was the fact that all the frivolous spending that I did in the past, the lack of planning, the fact that I didn't pay my debt on time, actually placed me in an inability to do things that I wanted to do as a
Mhm.
single mother who had two
Yeah.
children in the high school. And so it was just the weight, the burden was a lot. Then there was the fact that for years I walked around with a secret heaviness that I
Mm.
tried to end my life. The fact I disregarded the life that God gave me,
Sure.
and how that shame ultimately pushed me into becoming a woman who gave too many people too much access to my life, my body, my mind. And that secret was actually a burden that ate at my confidence as a woman. And that confidence obviously kind of, it ripples over, or it influences other areas of our life. for me, it was in the boardroom at work.
Mhm.
So for nearly 3 years, my sister Queen, 3 years after I encountered this beautiful, loving God of ours, I was still grappling with the fact that how can God actually change who I was and heal all the hurt and all the mistakes from my past, because I was continuously being reminded of that, but by the external influences.
Mhm.
But I need to point out to everyone who's listening today, it's not just external influences that hampers our vulnerability when we commit our lives to Christ. For
Yeah.
me, there was also an internal influence, and for
Mm.
me,
Yeah.
the internal influence for me was the fact that that initial 3 years after I encountered God, I had the secrets of, the sexual stimulation through masturbation and the watching of pornography that
Mm.
really fogged my spiritual eyes from seeing and accepting the complete work of the Lord. And whenever I speak
Yeah.
about this, because it's something that you don't normally would speak about, but it held me back, because whenever I felt into that intermittent moment of weakness, it
Mm.
pushed me into a place of spiritual hiding. And spiritual hiding is like you are so scared to actually worship God because you're fearful that somebody is going to see and remind you what you have done.
Yeah,
So
sure.
for me, it was a vicious circle. Even though I served God wholly and I worshiped Him with my all, with my body and my mind, I was still conflicted between what was being said of me and what I sometimes fell in, despite of what God has already done. But
Mhm.
I know this is a long introduction, but I want to highlight this. God
Yeah,
remained steadfast in pursuing my heart. He
sure.
remained steadfast in pursuing my soul and my mind. And every time when I opened my hearts towards Him from the vulnerability of my fallibility, if I can put it like
Yeah.
that, He still showered me with grace regardless of what I was struggling with from a human point of view.
Man, sure. And that is something that we sometimes lose sight of. He says that
We do.
even when we are unfaithful, he remains faithful because he cannot deny himself. Sure,
Correct,
that is
correct,
really powerful. Now, Liesel, based on your
correct.
journey, you were
Yeah,
still challenged by some aspects of your life and past
yeah.
behavior.
Mm.
How did you reach a spiritual awakening?
I think, again, personally for me, I wrote a lot about this in my book, Beautifully
Yeah,
Flawed. But my spiritual awakening was really a series of moments, engagements, and confrontations with God, moments of weaknesses with the Lord. It was not
yeah,
just a once off thing. Even now, I can't say now that my life is at the point where I'm not challenged by things that I used to do in my past, but I know that I have the liberty to come to God. But the one thing that really allowed me to develop a different spiritual awakening was my journey
yeah.
through the valley of the shadow of death, because
Wow.
it was there that I became acutely aware of God's presence. It was then that I realized that God is always in the room, no matter the space. I could sense His presence because I believed when I heard Him telling me at the beginning of the journey that He would
Yeah.
never leave me nor forsake me. His presence became like a cloud that was constantly around me. So it was
Mhm.
that acute awareness, my sister Queen, that ultimately renewed my mind on what I once believed was a secret, internal, harmless activity that I used to do in the quietness of my own home, because
Yeah.
I believed no one saw. So
Yeah.
when the realization of the all present Father seeing everything and that He was in every space that I found myself in, and even in the spaces where I was doing the things that I was not supposed to be doing to my body, that was the moment where my mind started shifting how I
Mm.
looked at life and God in a completely new way. Firstly, I was completely overcome with sadness just to think that He saw me in that state where I was giving pleasure to my body. So I think that remorse just ran. deep. I don't know how else to say it.
Yeah.
And it was then there in the face of death that that I realized ultimately that nothing else matters, Liesel. Nothing else matters other than who God is. Because otherwise you would not have felt, I wouldn't have felt that bad. I wouldn't have felt that deep remorse because of who he is and because
Mhm.
of the healing that I was so dependent on for him for during the valley
Yeah.
of the shadow of death. So I think his promise, if I'm hoping that this is making sense, his promise that he is with me always started transforming my mind first. It's very
Mhm.
important that I need to highlight it started with my mind. It was all about me. And then gradually, over time, the definition of what his presence then meant to me started stretching beyond just conquering the weakness of the body and the mind. It started seeping over to, God's presence as a guidance with the issues of life. So my
Yeah.
faith started developing a different type of, the definition of faith ultimately started changing for me. For example, how I used to respond to external negativity. And if I have
Mhm.
to use an example, which I think everybody can probably relate to, is the example of slander and gossip. People
Yep.
talk all the time, people gossip, and so we feel and we sense these presence of the gossip and the slander spirits when we walk into a room. And it's easy in our humanness to bite back when feelings are
Uh-huh.
hurt, but my
Mhm.
faith in who God is caused me to commit my reputation to him. I need to say it that way. It caused me to
True.
commit my reputation because all of a sudden it was, what should my reputation in God be like for him first and then for whoever has done it unto me. And during
Mm.
that time, one of the scriptures that really kept me was the scripture of Matthew 10, I think verse 26 or 25, I'm not sure. But it says, have no fear of them, for nothing is covered that will not be revealed or hidden that will not be known. So that ultimately tells me that truth always win in the end. We call it vindication. God vindicates us, and he's relentless and unyielding in his vindication of us. So his vindication is ultimately, he shows how he, as the king of all creation, comes from behind and he gives us victories over what has been
Yeah.
said about us. So he started guiding me on the issues of life. Similarly, then, faith in his promise became my comfort when the burden of my humanness, like emotions or worry, as a single mom, I was still burdened by the financial stresses. But faith in his promises became my comfort. And so over time, my knowledge of who God is,
Yeah.
we need to know who God is for us. My knowledge then of who God is started feeding my mind with the context of my measure of faith, which
Yeah.
caused me then to rest the full weight of my life and my future on Christ and Him alone. And
Mm.
so over time,
Oh.
gradually, and still today, and again, I need to remind the listeners, it's not like a once-off thing. It's a gradual process because faith
Mhm.
grows. God gives us a measure. Faith grows. Let me speak right. Faith grows because a measure of faith expands the more we are exposed to the things that used to challenge us in the past. But now we
Yeah.
overcome by how we apply in faith whatever God has given us in our hands. So we can obtain victory over the negative influences when love undefined starts stirring our compassion towards others. It's not about what the people do in the moment. It is
Yeah.
about what our moment and how our action in the moment can change eternity for them and glorify God in that process. And
Come on.
so I would say, my sister Queen, that my faith in God sustained who I should be when my heart is challenged by the negativities that we are constantly tested in. It is nobody is immune to negativity. It comes
Yep.
all the time. But what I had to learn to do, I had to learn to lean into his truth. And by leaning into his truth, I was then feeding my mind, my body, and my soul with his truth. And his truth is his word, and his word has the promises. And that is how we then
Mm.
renew our mind every day.
Sure. Come on, I love that. There's something that you said, earlier on. You said that the knowledge of who God is to you, right, to you,
Yeah.
enabled you to commit your reputation to Him, and I love that. And I
Yeah.
think that is the ultimate decider of how and what we respond and react in whatever situation,
Yes.
more so when it comes to negative
Yes.
influence. So that
Yes.
was powerful. That was really, really powerful. And again, for those who are tuned in, whether live on Facebook or on YouTube, we want to hear from you. How has your faith empowered you to
Mm.
overcome these negative influences in your life? And I'm
Yeah.
seeing some of the
Yeah.
few messages that came through. Someone says, I love this talk. Delisha says, that's a classic ammo of the enemy. Just like in the garden, he uses our shame to run away from God instead of running to
Mm.
the loving arms of
Correct.
our Savior, our Maker, the only one who can help us, heal us, and leaning on His arm, rather relying on His strength
Relay.
to help us overcome
Relay.
on
Mm.
weaknesses. Relies, I said relaying.
Oh,
But sure, this is really, really,
wonderful.
it's really,
It's
really
true.
wonderful and powerful,
It's true.
Liesel. Um,
It's so true.
and I want you to kind of paint us a picture of how the renewal of your mind, as you mentioned it,
Mm.
just now, and the transformation of your heart influenced your behavior today.
Okay, so if before I answer that question, because it's all about how we navigate through, our way out of the influences of the past and our present negative realities, but I want to just respond something to the what you mentioned about how how we live our life today is
Uh-huh.
to ensure that our reputation is brought before God. When I consult with my clients, I always speak about what is the brand that people see when they interact with you. And that should give somebody something to think about. What is the brand that you're leaving people with? And ultimately, that is the reputation that you want to leave for them. And if I
Mhm.
can offer advice as to what people can do. Oh, sorry, you asked how the transformation of my heart influenced my behavior today. I'm sorry,
Mhm.
I'm running ahead of you. I think just to kind of answer you that question, it is after I reflected on who I once was and how God accepted me despite it all. It
Mhm.
was then that the gift that I realized that He gifted me with the continuous gift of daily renewal of the mind. I
Sure.
need to say it the way I received it when I prepared for this, that when God accepted me despite it all, I know that He gifted me with the continuous gift of daily renewal of my mind, because God
Mm.
knew that there are days to our lives.
Yep.
So for me, after having lived so many years, I then concluded that for years, my moment was always defined by the mistakes and the behavior of my past. But when God has actually, in fact, given me life, so that with the renewal of my mind, my words started being defined to the worth of my life to His glory and the work
Mm.
that He has done in me, through me,
Yeah.
and for me. So I know now, my sister Queen, the way the transformation has influenced my heart. I know now that the change in my behavior was ignited when I accepted the complete work of God in me. And
Sure.
it was only in acceptance of, how do I put it? It was only in acceptance of God's complete work that I realized that it was actually how that faith became
Yeah.
in motion, because I accepted that God was saying, Liesel, you are, you are fearfully made, fearfully and wonderfully made. I was not wonderful yet, but God said that I was fearfully and wonderfully made. So I started applying my faith to what He was saying. I
Yeah.
am, even though I didn't see it yet. And that
Sure.
becomes the difference for me on a daily basis.
Sure. Come on. A reminder that God grants us grace each and every single day for the renewal of our minds. Now,
Yeah.
any advice you can offer to someone who is struggling, to navigate their way out of influences of the past, and more so present negative influences?
I think we need to recognize the power of our thoughts. It's okay to actually speak to your own mind to say, no, Liesel, don't think of that. Our
Yeah.
minds used to think of, if I think of myself, it was easy when I watched a movie to think about, the lustful emotions of the body in the past.
Yeah.
But now when
Mm,
I look at it, I either switch off the TV, change the channel, or I speak to my mind, or I walk away because I don't want it to
yeah.
go into my mind. And Proverbs, I think 23 verse 7 says, for as he thinks in his heart, so is he. And this should remind us that our thoughts shape our reality. So,
Yeah.
to everyone that's tuned in, be mindful of your thought patterns, and you need to challenge the negative thoughts that comes into your head, and surround yourself with positive affirmations. That's the second thing. The positive affirmations should always be aligned to the biblical truths, which is God's promises to you. And just to give you one example, I think Second John 1 verse 2 says, yet to all who receive Jesus, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. So if anybody tells you that you are not a child of God, Second John 1 verse 12 says.
Yeah.
So that's a positive affirmation. And similarly, David says, God is our refuge and our strength. He's
Yeah.
always ready to help us in times of trouble. That is your
Mhm.
affirmation. You write it down if you have to. I remember what my daughter did when she went through the renewal of her mind. She used these sticky tape, the stickers, and
Mhm.
she pasted it against the mirror. Every time she went into the mirror, then she would, or into the bathroom, she would see it, and that was a reminder. And I think the third point to our listeners, maybe, practice gratitude. It is so easy to be pulled into negativity, but
Yeah.
reflect on God's goodness. Be reminded of where He took you from, how you used to be, and how you are now. That even though we don't have what we would like to have in Him, but He
Mhm.
has changed so much already, and that the gratitude ultimately ignites the joy that we all have inside of us. And then I think, if I can maybe add this one as well, that we need to view God according to His present character. You need to know who
Yeah.
God is for you now. What is God doing for you? Also, remember the shape of God, the shape of who God was in your past, how He transformed your mind when He stepped into your heart, when you made your heart available to Him. So view God according to His present character also. And then I think maybe as a fifth point that I can give to our listeners is change your crowd. If you want to run away
Yes.
from negative
Yes.
influences, and the influences are with the people that you are in association with, then if the people don't make you better, and there's a bitterness that comes with being around them, step away. Be in
Yeah.
isolation with God, and allow God to then reveal to you who your crowd should be.
Come
I
on.
think that is
Yeah,
it.
sure. I love that. I love that. And perhaps, in closing, just to wrap it all up,
Yeah.
wrapping up the discussion this morning, the power of faith over negative influences. Any closing remarks or words?
I think the one thing that stands out for me is that we don't need to have it all figured out, my sister Queen. We actually
Mhm.
don't need to be perfect when we come to God. We
Mhm.
don't need to feel less worthy to come before Him with the weaknesses that we fall into again. God really just wants us to see Him for who He is, and that is the great potter. So, as the
Yeah.
great potter, He will take the moments of our weaknesses, and He will shape it into something that will ultimately be used for His glory. So, never, never understate the value of how great and magnificent God is. Come as you are. seek his heart, and he will take the ignorance that we used to live by and turn it
Mm,
around into a knowledge that is greater than, that is second to none, based on your own story. And your story is
mm.
beautiful because God has made your story possible.
Oh, come on. Beautiful. Thank you so, so much. A
You
lot of
are so
people are
welcome.
just touched by today's topic. Someone says, is it Pranisha on Facebook? Pranisha says, we bind our minds to the mind of Christ. That
Mm.
is powerful. Natalie says, I felt so discouraged today. This chat let me feel a little light.
Our Lord, thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so, so much. Someone else says who's tuned in from YouTube. Bradley says, good morning. This is superb. I'm viewing and tuned into the radio. Thank you so, so much. Now, ma'am, you have a
To
song
God
that
be
you want
all
us
the
to
glory.
you have a song that you want us to kind of wrap this up. It's by
Yes.
Chandler Moore, Lead Me On. Why this particular song?
I think for me, the important thing about Lead Me On, or something that really struck me, is how our foolishness does not dismay God to chase after us. That
Mm.
He is willing to take us if we just come to Him and say, God, you lead this foolish heart of mine who actually
Oh,
don't know
man.
half of what my life can be worth. You lead me, and then He can take our foolishness and make it into something beautiful. So, yeah.
Oh,
Hope it
beautiful.
encourages those who's going to listen to that.
Fantastic. Sister Queen, thank you so much. I'm gonna go ahead and play it because of time. We have to cut our
Yeah,
chat at this point. All the very best. Take a picture. I'll send you mine, and because we're matching today. For those who haven't seen it, please Facebook, YouTube. We are literally matching on par. But thank you so much. You're such an inspiration.
love it
You really
lots.
impact a lot of lives, and I hope that you do not, underlook that or overlook that. A lot of lives gets impacted and minds renewed every time you
Um,
take on the mic. So thank you so much. Until next time, lots of love.
love you lots. Bye, everyone. Toodles.
Right, she requested this one. It's titled "Lead Me On" and it's done by Chandler Moore.